Hi and welcome. My name is Laura and I'm hosting this UCU Pension Strikes 2022 Teach Out. I hope that you can hear me clearly and that you're able to view the stream live, or if we manage to edit it, we will hopefully be able to add a few highlights to the channel after the streaming has stopped. As with most academic events, we're doing this a little bit on the fly, and at present we're just going through a few technical complications getting people into this particular live stream setting. So we will be introducing our first speaker in a few moments once we manage to get him on the call. But first of all, you may have been wondering or asking yourselves, what on earth is this all about? Why are lecturers and university staff engaging in industrial action? Well, that's a really good question. So what I would really like to do is I would like to bring in my colleague, Kevin, who's going to tell you a little bit about that. So hi, Kevin, I can see you on my screen. Let's see if I can just add you to the live stream.
Hello. Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, we're live. Hello. Welcome. Yeah.
Right, nice to see you today.
Slightly realign my camera so that it doesn't. Ah, there we go. Just slightly. There we go.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming along. We've managed to get some technology working, which is pretty impressive for academics doing things with technology we're unfamiliar with. We're not using Zoom, which is the one thing that we are now familiar with. So we're spreading our wings, trying all kinds of new and exciting technologies once again. So, Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about what these strikes are about? What's going on with this industrial action that people are taking part in at the university?
Okay, well, I will try and I've got a couple of. I'll now try and quasi-innovate further, possibly by trying to see if I can share my slide window. Yes, I think I can. So, oh, maybe it doesn't. But
I am having some technical hijinks with that at my end, I will say. So we might have to ad lib without slides.
But yeah, so basically, well, okay, I wouldn't put it. So basically, yeah, we've been kind of running this strike now for about 4 years, actually. So kind of when this new strike kind of was announced, I kind of thought, well, actually, it was a long time that since we first had a strike, which was in early 2018. I actually had to go and look through my diaries and whatever to try and work out when that was. And at that time, yeah, we had a very long, quite deep strike. We had very good kind of take up in it as well, from the middle of February running to the end of March. And then we had an academic year without strikes, and we had a later series of strikes running from autumn 2019 to spring 2020 as well. So at that time, the threat was very much to take away what are called defined benefits. I think I've got that the right way around.
And that's a type of pension, isn't it? The defined benefit is a type of pension.
So to very basically define the kind of the points and to define what they are, defined benefit pension is one where you know the formula of the pension. And obviously, so for those of you that don't know, usually with a pension scheme, your employer pays in a contribution and you pay a contribution from your wages. Okay, so a lot of students watching this may not be aware exactly of how it works. So currently we contribute 30%, or contributions are equivalent to 30.7% of our salary. And we pay 9.6%, which is deducted from our salary, our wages. And then the university matches out for 21.1% contribution as well. So this is one of the hidden costs, if you like, of employing staff for any employer. In fact, now, of course, in the UK, all employers have to pay a kind of workforce or workplace pension of some type. So there's now a government scheme for this. And the long-term kind of reason for this, essentially, if you like, is that we've had old age pensions since about 1909 in the UK, but obviously the state, it's a political issue, and it's difficult for the state to support everybody to the highest level that it once had. And we won't go into the full kind of politics of that, but the idea of this is that this would supplement your state pension, and it's a benefit, essentially. It's a part of the employment package for any employer and in any career, actually. So it's not just in academia. This is a major part of kind of remuneration, really, for employees in all sorts of areas. And this should interest, students today who want to go into graduate careers, because one of the big kind of benefits, really, of having a graduate career, at least traditionally, has been having a secure pension, right? So if you want to go and work for PwC or whoever, you want to go and work for one of the big four, or you want to go and work for a bank or any other kind of large graduate employer, then part of that will be the promise of a pension one day. So to go back to our kind of point where we kind of started, the defined benefit idea would be that you're going to pay your contribution over a long time, and the employer will, but you also get a final benefit that's known. And essentially the idea is that the employer would probably then be liable eventually for paying that kind of shortfall, if there was one. Not that there should be a shortfall, but a defined contribution model is basically where the employer and the fund holder kind of reneges on that guarantee, so it doesn't guarantee the final benefit. Okay, and that's the kind of shift that USS are trying to make and have been trying to make. The 2018 strikes actually managed to build enough opposition to delay this from happening for a while. Of course, what subsequently happened is that we've had Corona, and one of the effects of that has been that it's created a new excuse for universities to review these things, and we now have a evaluation of the value of the pension scheme. So the other important thing, actually, before I say that, the other important thing to understand here, again, so there may be students from very different disciplines joining here. We have 20 actuarial science or 30 actuarial science students in the university, but you all know this well. But for everybody else, the other important thing to remember is that the money that's paid into the pension, it doesn't just sit there. Right. So this is the thing. It might sound like a top-heavy model. You might be thinking, well, hang on, he's saying that that money should go there. What about inflation? What about it sounds like a top-heavy model, and actually that's the kind of the government excuse for trying to cut state pension benefits in some ways. But of course, it gets invested. So the money goes in, it gets invested in the stock market and in other investments. Again, things like government debt, or even kind of commodities or currencies or whatever it is, but it gets invested in something else. Okay, or in securities and all sorts of things like this. Okay, now that's the kind of job of the sort of pension fund holders to do this. So the idea is that fund should grow over time, and therefore it will be payable. Now, there are some organizations that do actually have structural pension deficits as well, that have increased over time, and they have to meet these pension deficits. But and these are typically in industries where there are a lot of people working in the past, but not so much now. Now, academia is not one of those. Okay,
so can I just clarify that then, Kevin? So what you're saying is that basically everybody's paying into these pensions. The employees are paying into these pensions. The employers are paying into these pensions. And then you have a central fund, which is being managed or invested by some people who've been employed specifically to do this, some experts, yeah?
Yeah.
So they manage it, and we would expect that overall that fund would grow over time in the same way because of the way the stock market works. There might be some variation in individual things they've invested in, but it's their job to manage that, yeah?
Yeah.
And that fund is having to pay out to the people who've retired.
Yeah. So that's basically the idea. Is that so that money stays in there, but obviously, as people retire over time, that stock of people retiring over time increases. So there is the risk in some funds, of course, that if you have an industry, say something like coal mining in the UK would be a good example, something like that has contracted quite a lot. It's currently employing something like less than 5,000 people, but it used to employ several hundred thousands. then that's obviously going to be a big pension liability. A lot of local authorities kind of struggle in this way as well, now having to kind of meet those liabilities. Now, the universities are kind of trying to make out, or they're trying to make out that they have this problem, but essentially they don't, because more people are contributing overall and continue to contribute, and the scheme is growing. So universities are growing, the scope of universities have grown. Since the 1980s and 1990s, when a lot of the people that are now retiring or have retired, worked, that are currently being kind of paid out of the pension, if you like. So yeah, so mathematically, there doesn't seem to me, and I'm not an actuary. These are kind of quasi, not quite amateur, but quasi, non-professional views of it. But it's a very different kind of situation in our sector. The other specific issue is that the valuation currently being used by USS, by the University Superannuation Scheme, which is the body that manages the pension, manages that fund, valued the scheme last on the 31st of March 2020. Now, Laura, would you consider the 31st of March 2020 to be a good time to value an investment?
I mean, a lot of things were happening at the end of March 2020, weren't they? In the UK, we had just gone into a lockdown. Lots of businesses had closed. The stock market was going crazy. Everybody thought it was the end of the world. It was a very unpredictable time. I imagine that a lot of stock market sort of activity was very low. And I think unfortunately, we can't share screens, but there are definitely some graphs that show that, aren't there, Kevin?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a great big dip in the stock market. So I was actually looking at this the other day. I think it was on Mike Otukska's Medium article, which we'll add in the info for people who are watching the video. And that was pointing out that at that time period when they valued the amount in that pot, in that pension pot, it was about 6.5 billion, maybe 6.6 billion. Whereas today it's valued at around about 9 billion, which is considered like kind of about where they thought it would be. So that's like almost half again of how big it was. Which is a very big difference in the numbers, isn't it?
Because obviously we knew in March 31st of March 2020, certainly we knew that at that time, we knew that we were in a lot of trouble in the economy. We knew in our own sector that things were quite difficult, but at the same time, there was a sense that it wouldn't last forever. Yes, it's taken longer than we thought, but the thing is that I think, so you might have seen, for example, at that time that shares in, so a good example of this was businesses like Cineworld, right? So cinema companies that couldn't open at all, right? So their shares, I think, were trading, a stable £2 or something like that. Not great before the pandemic, and fell under 50p. And of course they were going to, weren't they? But inevitably, not surprisingly, as soon as cinemas were going to reopen, the money went back behind the shares, because people in the stock market were like, well, that's an easy win, isn't it? So, and it'll return to hopefully a stable equilibrium. And there are lots of phenomena like this in the economy where, a large part of the stock market now is around things like hospitality, tourism, and other kind of related fields. So, whereas these would have been, shares in firms like Fuller's or, they might have been considered to be a Marston's, right? They might have been considered to be kind of blue chip shares beforehand, be the kinds of things that pension funds would invest in. But so what you're seeing is a kind of a judgment of the snapshot, of judgment of the fund's welfare, basically based on a period when a lot of the firms in the portfolio, and I don't know exactly what the portfolio composes of, but I'm prepared to guess that a lot of these firms just weren't trading as normal, or not even trading at all. So
right? I mean, a lot of things were closed. And I guess, I mean, the other thing is, even in higher education. So I've heard people speculate, now I don't know if this is true, but I've heard people speculate that some of those funds are invested in things like rental accommodation.
Yeah, of
Now,
course. Yeah.
a lot of rental accommodation, that was also very sort of on edge, very uncertain how that was going to perform, because obviously a lot of people were going home to their countries of origins, returning to their families. There was this sort of stoppage of movement. So a lot of accommodation, especially university accommodation, that would normally have been full, companies were like, it's going to be empty. The students are not going to come.
Yeah.
So that, there are a lot of different dynamics that might have affected that. But we don't disagree with the principle that there should be a regular valuation of the pension fund to check that it's healthy. I mean, that seems a very responsible thing to do, doesn't it? And we would expect that there needs to be some check on the people who are managing the fund to make sure that they're doing their jobs. It's
Yeah.
just that, we think maybe that particular date was a bit unreasonable, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's normal governance. So that's fine, right? And that would happen every 2 years, as I understand it. And presumably we're coming up to another one. But that is kind of, that's a normative, yeah, it's a normal part of governance. We would expect to see that happen, obviously, as kind of stakeholders, beneficiaries of that fund. It's held in trust for us as people are going to benefit from the fund. So of course we would, and for the universities as well, actually. So we would expect that to happen. I mean, one of the reasons that it's worth mentioning as well, students might be thinking, well, why can't each university have its own pension fund or something like this? Well, this could happen, but the idea is that the more that you pool together, essentially, funds,
Shares the risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, that you share the risk. So some staff at York are on a York pension scheme. In some PSS parts of the university, I think in estate services and things like this. But that scheme is not as beneficial as USS because it's only set up for kind of a small section of York employees, essentially. So it's not able to have the same kind of potential long-term benefits that a scheme such as this can bring. So it's a good idea to have a pooled scheme such as this as well, because it shares the risk, and the more funds you have in it, essentially, the more you can benefit from that upswing in the economy that comes. For example, in a current kind of resetting of the economy, essentially. But again, another factor here is that we're told all the time that professional finance people are great and fantastic. So surely,
yeah, we'd like to think that they're able at doing their job. So, what is it that we're actually being asked to agree to? Why is it that we're disagreeing and we're coming out on strike about this? I mean, is it are they just saying we're not going to get any pension? What's going on there?
Well, so a big part of this seems to be that, so essentially what's happening is they're not saying we won't get a pension, but what we will see is considerable cuts in the amount of pension that we can expect to get. Okay, so I ran this, there's a calculator that anybody can use on the UCU website that I go and encourage anybody to look at. So I looked at just the case of an average lecturer. I'm not going to reveal what anybody here is paid precisely, but I looked at the case of, say, an average lecturer of my age that earns £50,000 per annum, roughly, would see a drop of about £7,000 to £8,000 per year of pension entitlement, potentially. So you retire. So from now, if I just work from now to the end of my lifetime, I could have a potential benefit of £18,530 a year of pension to live on. Right, this could be cut to £10,773. Now, okay, someone like me already has quite a lot of money, has quite a lot of pension already saved up. There's no kind of cut mooted to existing defined benefits, so just to be clear. But this would be what you can add to it kind of going forward. Obviously, I'm still, I'm just over 25 years old. So no, not really, but, but I still have quite a lot. I've still got potentially 25, 30 years of career. to go, certainly 25 years of career. So if I'm lucky, so that means that amount that I can add actually means quite a lot to me. So obviously, a lot of people watching this will be thinking, well, my parents, they may have parents that are retired, or grandparents that are retired seem to be quite comfortable. This may be because they have workplace pensions. It's almost certainly the case that, they'll have some, it'll be probably because they have workplace pensions that pay for them quite comfortably. If you're getting 18,000, I would say that is, it's not as much as you're getting paid when you're working, but if you fully paid off your house and things like this, that's okay. I would say, however, that £10,000 is maybe pushing it a little bit. There is another thing to mention here as well, though, is that they have said that the lump sum that they give you, so they will also give you a lump sum, and they do that now. They give you a lump sum on retirement as well. Now, they're claiming that lump sum will be increased, but that is not a guaranteed increase. And that will relate to the performance of the pension fund at the time that you retire.
So that sounds to me, Kevin, very much like if I was coming to this from a private sector perspective, I might kind of think, well, hang on, that actually sounds very much like the sort of private pension that you might have in the private sector. And I know some of the numbers we've been talking here, we don't want to sort of like pinpoint individual people who might join this call and kind of say, what do you earn? But the pay grades at our university are actually available online. You can actually look those up. They are publicly available documents. And if I've actually got them open on my screen at the moment, and approximately, I think, what salary they offer somebody who's starting out on a lecturing contract is around about £40,000 to £41,000 per year.
Yeah.
And then, as people get more experienced, as they progress in their careers, the top salary grade that they show on the website, I don't know if there are any above this, is about £68,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now, both of those sound like a fairly decent salary, but at the same time, I'm thinking, in the private sector, there are a lot of people that I went to university with. So they're the same age as me. They've got the same degrees, the same experience. Some of them don't have a PhD, some of them do. And those people who went to work in the private sector, they're already earning substantially more than that £68,000. So they are in a position to save more of that money for their retirement. And their employer often pays less into a pension on their behalf than our employer does. So that's part of the trade-off that we make, isn't it, when we decide to go into this industry, into education.
And also, I mean, I started my first full academic job at 28, right? So, so it took that long to get fully trained, and I only had 1 year out basically from when I started, undergraduate to when I got my PhD, right? So we look at quite a delayed entry to the full labour market as well.
Yeah,
so that's another factor.
So the number of years that you're earning are less than
the full earnings time is less, and actually that 68 grand at the top is the top kind of, that's the band that a professor would get. That's internally. So there are some people that are earning more than that on, contracts that are more exclusive to them, but they're the people at the very top end, and people like deans and pro-vice chancellors and maybe professors that publish a lot or have really big ESRC grants, right? So
yeah, so they're not the norm, I guess, is what we're trying to emphasize. And a lot of people are not going to get to that point in their entire career as well.
No. And so there is one thing that happens in our career that some other careers have kind of lessened, is that we go up a spinal point per year, but then if you reach the top of your, so they're basically four bandings, right? So lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, and professor. And once you reach the top of that banding, then you're kind of stuck until you can get promoted, or you go outside and get a job somewhere else. So you do have the reasonable certainty of a small increase per year within that banding, but a lot of people will get stuck. And of course, the other thing is that we haven't actually had a substantial with inflation pay rise since, what is it, 2008 or something like that. So yeah, so these figures might sound quite a lot in some ways, but they are actually being, you know, gradually eroded. And it's basically, it relies on the performance of individuals and the pressure that comes with that for individuals to increase their pay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the key things that a lot of people who are involved in these strikes have been emphasizing
Mm.
is that, you know, people are not out on strike because they're feeling greedy or
No,
because they're saying we want more money. You know, it's very much about the fact that there are all of these complex dynamics around the pay and rewards in higher education that don't just affect lecturers, they affect all staff in the university. And that means that people are taking on more work, but because they're not getting paid as much, because they're not so secure in their jobs, they're not as able to actually provide a really good quality learning experience for students. So
yeah,
that, combined with a whole load of other inequities, such as the gender and race pay gap in academia, are some really serious issues that are all kind of tied up in this industrial action as well, aren't they?
yeah,
So if a student was to be watching this right now and wondering, okay, so this is really complex and I'm beginning to get a bit of an idea about it, but how is this going to affect me and my degree? What would you want to sort of say to that student?
Well, I think, yeah, I think what you want is you want staff that are well, you know, they're well incentivized, they're bought in, and they feel secure and comfortable in their roles. And a lot of the evidence on academic, so Leah will talk later about managerialism, right? But a lot of the evidence now on academic leadership and the ways that universities should be run, that basically, you know, you need to create an environment where people can do their best work. And this includes teaching. So you need a secure teaching environment where people are not worrying about pension conditions and pay conditions and working conditions and all these kinds of things. And they're not, you know, and that will mean that people, you know, concentrate, they feel secure and they concentrate more on, you know, preparing the sort of teaching, yeah, that they're doing. So, you know, remembering as
Yeah.
well that one lecture that you see as 1 hour could take at least 3 hours to put together. So I know students think that, you know, we don't do anything outside of
They'll magically just in our
but,
heads.
but it kind of, you know, it takes, you know, it could take at least, you know, it could take up to 2-3 hours, and actually it's costed that way on our workload models, you know, to do one lecture and to do one seminar and to build up
And
activity.
that's just the teaching that we do, that, you know, we do year on year when we're developing new things, when we're programming new degrees or new modules or new content. That takes additional time as well, doesn't it? So
And we're spending a lot of time on this at the moment with the semesterization kind of program in the university that we should probably be working on right at this moment, actually, but we're not. So,
yes, yeah, we're
but
on strike instead.
so it's like I said, but you know that, but this is a program that this is a process that we're changing everything in, or we're changing our structures in 2 years' time of delivery, but it's going to take almost all of that 2 years to prepare for it. Okay, so it's so these are big things, because even beyond the kind of individual lectures, there's a whole job that we do of thinking about how the lectures fit together, how these topics fit together, how the exams fit together, how, you know, if you do a degree in business and management, how does that fit together out of all the different topics like finance or marketing or HR or whatever it is that you need to cover to get an idea of how to do it. So yeah, how does that fit together, create a summation of knowledge? And we have to go through quite a lot of stages actually to get that together. And then there's all the problems like, you know, you can't teach this on a Wednesday because somebody else needs that room or things like this. So
There's a lot of detail to work out, a lot of detail
yeah,
to work out. But I
so,
mean, I guess that one of the key messages for students is you want us to be doing that work. You want our professional support staff to be telling us, no, you can't do it on Wednesday, you have to do it on
yeah,
Tuesday or whatever it is, so that we can get that designed in a way that's going to work for you, You don't want us spending our time with our head in our hands going, oh, how am I going to pay for my retirement because my mortgage is too expensive and I'm going to have to pay for my house until I'm 75.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what you want us to be doing.
Yeah, and it's not a good use of the money that you're investing into the system either, right? So yeah, so we're told, so this is another factor is that one way or another, students are also paying for the kind of education that they receive. So there is a good value for money for them to have staff that are distracted.
Absolutely.
And are underpaid or undervalued by the system in which they sit. I don't think so. And one of the other things we've got to remember as well is that our job is unusual in the sense that it divides into 3 distinct categories. And so a lot of the staff that are teaching you, they will spend only a third of their time on teaching. That's not to say they don't take that seriously, but they're kind of expected to be publishing as well, for example, often, or to be doing jobs that just basically keep the university running. So next time you want to complain about a module or something like that, think about that. For example, who does that go to? Who keeps the system running? Who does all of the kind of arbitration and all that sort of thing that then kind of sorts out any problems that you're having with lecturers and so on? So all of these structures take time, and they need staff that are well invested and are passionate about what they're doing.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for all of your insight, Kevin. I believe I'm going to see if I can get one of our other colleagues to come in and join us. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to take you out.
Yep.
So thanks so much for everything that you've come along and said today. It's been really informative. Sorry we couldn't share the slides. I think we're going to have this problem with Leo's as well. I'm trying to see if I can sort it out. But this has been really informative. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you again throughout the rest of our action. And I hope that we can make a difference and bring about some change.
And thanks for producing this so slickly, because that
yes, we are not the BBC, but we're trying our best. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Anybody who's just come along, this is the teach out about the pension strikes. And I'm hoping at this point that I can ask my colleague Leo to come on and follow along the link so that he can join us on the stream. So let's just see if he can join us. So Leo is going to be talking about how this fits into the broader picture. What we've really been talking about so far, what Kevin's been telling us, is about the sort of mechanics of the pension fund and why this is sort of directly affecting staff at universities and our concerns in terms of the immediate impact on our sort of monetary and financial rewards and remunerations. And also more broadly on students' experience in the university. So hi, Leo. Thank you for joining. I can see you have now entered our streaming platform. So I'm going to add you to the stream. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Hi, Leo. Can you see yourself there?
I can. I can see you, Laura. Everyone hear me okay?
Absolutely, loud and clear. Thank you.
So I was watching the stream and I've pressed pause so we don't get the feedback. So is that all okay?
That is absolutely brilliant, Leo. We don't have any audio feedback going on, so we can hear you clearly and it's all doing well. Thanks for coming along today. That's working more smoothly than I'd anticipated. I'm really sorry I can't get the slides thing to work.
You don't need them, it's okay.
But Leo's going to give us a bit of an overview about how this fits into sort of broader trends in terms of the impact on higher education and what sort of function universities have in our society. So can you sort of explain to us, Leo, what universities have to do with markets? What do you mean when you say a university is marketized?
Right. Thanks, Laura. I mean, this is at the heart of this dispute and of others leading up to it in the past. Universities are legally charities in this country. And historically, they had a lot of independence and autonomy. And their culture was really quite different from how they are now. And their purpose and role in society has really changed quite fundamentally, really in the last sort of 15, 20 years or so, where the notions of sort of markets and competition, chasing the customer has kind of become central to the way the organization is thought of and thinks of itself. I mean, markets are kind of the dominant mechanism really for delivery of all kinds of services and products in a society, in a free market system broadly that we have. But this has only recently started to be applied to universities, and it's created a lot of perverse effects. Competition can do good things in, say, finished goods. Think back, what was the first mobile phone you owned, Laura?
Oh, I had the classic Nokia with Snake on it.
The 7210 or something, was it called?
Yeah. The
little plastic thing.
That one.
Yeah, the Snake game, and good battery life, but crappy screen, no functionality, whatever, right? Compare that to, I don't know what you own now, but it's just a quantum leap in terms of functionality, standards, availability, whatever. I mean, back then, Nokia, everyone had that Nokia, right? It was that there's only 4 or 5. Well, there were other phones available, but everyone kind of had the same one. They were pretty basic. So the same logic to sort of cars, computers, finished goods. Quality has gone up, reliability has gone up, functionality, all of it's gone up, and price has stayed competitive, right? You can afford. You don't have to be rich to afford a good laptop or a regular, a reliable car that doesn't break down and won't start in a damp, cold conditions, which we never have in England. So markets may work effectively in certain sectors, but they don't work so well in all kinds of service sectors, where the price just continues to go up, for example, or where the competition really doesn't lead to improvement in services and standards. You think of health, you think of education, local government, policing, all kinds of sectors, utilities, power, gas, oil, electricity, whatever it might be, loads of services, transport, where competition has made the service worse, or made the service just hasn't improved the service for customers or for the deliverers of that service, right? And I think the same has happened in universities, opening it up to competition and charging very high fees for students to be allowed to be registered on these degrees has led to all kinds of changes in the sector, which I think are the root cause of this dispute and others.
Okay, all right. So, when you say that universities have been marketized and they're competing with one another, do you mean in terms of for money or for student places? Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, they've always competed in the sense that there's been kind of a hierarchy of the kind of kudos, right? In terms of the status. And so in some sense, the academics, in a strange way, sort of compete in a way, right? By producing their work and having a debate in the world of ideas, right? They've always done that to some degree, right? But over the years, they are literally competing for students. And then the fee income is fundamental to their business model. The income from fees, not just from undergrads, but increasingly from masters, where the fees aren't capped, it kind of gives you an indication of where we're going, where you've got very expensive fees and a drive to recruit as many students as you possibly can to build up the university's cash account, right? And in order to do that, you need to be a competitive university where you want to attract the students. And how are you going to do that? You're going to maybe build new facilities. You're going to borrow heavily to build new halls, accommodations, sports centers, entertainment complexes. You're going to build a whole new campus in many cases. You might open a campus, kind of bridgehead campuses overseas. the University of Nottingham at Kuala Lumpur, for example, is one of the early examples of this, right? You're going to be doing everything you can to bring in more student income through spending. It means spending more on marketing. It means borrowing heavily. It also means playing around with the league tables. Doing what you can to maybe game those league tables, to play around with the statistics, find ways to incentivize the organizations that you make a jump in those league tables and can then demand more. So this is what's happening. You're seeing this kind of intensifying competition between universities for that student budget, for that fee-paying student budget.
And so that's a relatively new thing. I mean, students didn't used to pay fees, did they? Or at least home students didn't used to pay fees. But there was always some sort of fee paid by international students. And there's still a big difference, isn't there, in the amount that students from overseas pay versus what students from the UK pay.
Yeah, that's right.
Once upon a time, I'm sure it was the case that the difference between those two numbers was made up to the university by sort of government subsidy.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, people spoke. Yeah, remember there was this idea of used to be called top-up fees when they first came in. When was this? Early 2000s, right? There was a debate in Parliament about this, and fees were used to be completely paid by the local authority. Locally, they'd pay for you, and the student would also get a grant, maintenance grant on top of that. That all disappeared in the late 90s. And then there was this issue of the top-up fees. The fees were set by this kind of strange quasi-market mechanism, government and market mechanism, to figure out how much the fees are, calculate the fees. And then you'd basically pay some of that, the student or the student's parents would pay some of that to allow the registration. Now they basically pay all of it, or pretty much all of it. And so the question is, where does that go? And it seems it can only go up. If you look at the theory of Baumol's cost disease, William Baumol is an economist writing in the 1960s, who argued that the market dynamic can force down the price mechanism, and the price mechanism and the competition mechanism can improve quality, as we've seen with cars, phones, laptops, etc. But with services, it's very hard to do, right? He used the example of a string quartet that is as efficient now as it was in the 18th century, right? You can't make them play faster, or you can't have a duet and play the same music, right? So with service economy, it's very hard for that price to come down. Yeah, and as we've seen, the fees just keep rising. You look across the pond, America, and look at the fees and the extraordinary debts that students and students' families have been asked to take on to go through university. What used to be seen as a public service is now a cost, a debt-financed personal service for your own development. So we've really lost track with the idea of university being a public service provision, and that's brought with it all of these pressures. So why is this such a bad thing? If the universities run like a business, if the universities run on a cost basis, then they'll have to do what they can to minimize costs, right? That means, pay restraint. That means pension reform. That means redundancies. We've seen in many organizations, very sadly in universities, redundancies at a number of very high-profile British universities, which has caused all kinds of destruction of whole degrees being cut, departments being closed. When you run this according to a market, what are you going to do with some of those disciplines that are very hard to study? Things like modern languages. They're expensive to teach. They don't attract a huge amount of students, and those courses are just dying. What happens to fine arts? What happens to music? What happens to archaeology? Some of these disciplines are under critical threat. The flip side is degrees like management, degrees like business, information analysis, computer studies. These just grow and grow and grow, right? So you and I work in a management school. We can reflect on the scale of the work, the amount of students we have to supervise, to teach, to look after, all of the elements that we have to do as responsible educators. That's getting harder and harder to do in an organization with such enormous student numbers. Meantime, other departments are starved of students and are declining. Now, if you believe in the markets, like Adam Smith or Friedrich Hayek or someone of that nature, you'd maybe say, well, that's just the cost of doing business. The good drives out the weak. You've not got enough customers. You should close that line of business down. I'm not sure that's appropriate in a kind of a knowledge society, in an advanced, decent society, to just close entire disciplines.
Absolutely. And there's a good point that's been raised in the chat here as well, that not all degrees cost the same amount of money to actually run, do they? I mean, obviously you have some science degrees, they have an awful lot of technical equipment that is very expensive. It's expensive to buy, it's expensive to run. You have to train students on it. So that's an additional cost as well. So the fees are not always proportional to the cost, are they? And we do have this question of some disciplines being used to cross-subsidize other disciplines in a university. Now, it's quite interesting. I did have a look at our university's financial report for 2021. And if you look at their figures, they do actually provide some charts that break down the sort of the price or the money that they bring in from student fees, both home and international, and then where that money goes. And I think some students might be quite surprised by how little proportionally the university receives from other sources of income, from research or other kinds of income based on the university's portfolio. And that's going to be different for every university, isn't it? But these sort of broader trends, this marketization thing that's going on, that's affecting all universities in the UK. So although the individual university might have different financial positions, across the sector, we're seeing the same trends.
We're seeing the same trends. And a lot of this is then thought through in terms of new management strategies. And I think I've been in the university sector for over 20 years. When I first started teaching and researching, research used to have a more dominant position, I would say. And the focus on meeting certain research metrics, the research assessment exercise, the research excellence framework, these were government or Quango-driven kind of metrics, key performance indicators to try and drive up universities' research outputs, right? And there was dollar value attached to that, pound value attached to that, right? So in a sense that if your department does well on these assessments of your writing and publishing, then you get a bigger slice of the research cake. That's still there, but what's increasingly more serious, I think, to the university's balance sheet is the teaching income, the student income. So we then have this shift over to the kind of student experience, and this language of a student experience has kind of become very dominant across the UK and other countries too, right? Which is about basically thinking of the students as customers. And when
we used to have this idea that students were members, didn't we? Students were part of the institution. Yes. The institution was aimed at improving the public in general, and we would educate the public either directly by people coming and studying with us, or indirectly by sort of engagement with all kinds of different aspects of private and public sector organizations, right? Sure. But now we're not thinking about that sort of bigger picture. We're just concentrating on the student that comes in and then leaves, almost like a factory product.
That's what many critics will say, yeah. And so there is this element that the student experience is kind of a manufactured idea, and that the student is really, in a way, that kind of infantilizes the student and transforms him or her into a customer who sort of passively receives a service, in much the same way that you might be a BT customer for your phone and your TV, right? And if you're dissatisfied with that service, you can use some of it, watch some of it, not use other bits of it. You don't really do any work as a customer, right? You're not really involved as a customer too. You just pay for a service which you may or may not use. And you can drop if you don't like it. You can break your contract. Well, you can try, right? But as a student, as customer, is a very disempowering notion of a student, I think. And I think that's the identity that's being forced on students. Some are trying to reject that identity. It's hard to, when you're being asked to pay £9,000 a year, that that de facto makes you a customer on some level, right? Whether that also changes your mindset and behavior is another question. And what I've noticed over the years, and with all these strikes and disruption, most students I meet are rejecting the customer identity, right? They want to be treated as someone, as a member of a community, right? Like we are, a member of a university, a kind of community of scholars learning and researching and thinking and developing together, right? They want to be proactive. They want to be involved. They don't want to be fee-paying customers in that sense. And I feel that the focus on the student experience, weirdly, in a way, can put a barrier between us and the students, right? Rather than us being kind of involved together. Once if they internalize the position of being a paying customer, it can create divisions, right? It can create tensions. And I think most of them don't want that. I think that's certainly been my impression. And I think once you have this idea of a student experience, that just further feeds the intensification of the competition for students, right? Again, so building new buildings, new entertainment complex, sports centers, etc. And if you control the cost base, if the customers are paying those fees, you want to also pay what you need to deliver that service, but also reduce the cost base so you can squeeze costs and borrow more, right? I think this is the undisclosed business model that universities are running. They do differ, of course, their balance sheets differ, but the overall business model is quite similar. And weirdly, it's quite unoriginal. If you look at the kind of culture that goes with it, if you look at universities' websites, they're all quite similar. If you look at their strategies, they're all quite similar.
Yeah, we can see this push towards standardization, can't we?
Yeah, you can.
It's like the McDonald's sort of style.
Yeah,
Every
the MOOC
fast food
University
chain will be the same.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of that, and it's kind of strange. And I think it's actually a break on our ambition, right? For a university to be, they have got the freedom to be quite independent. Still, they're still charities, right? They're still legally independent and autonomous in many ways, and yet they're many of them blindly following this very similar trajectory and culture. And I think you get these strange dynamics where you go on a university webpage. It's not really run by the academics. It's run by senior level administrators, marketers, etc. The websites, it's often very hard to find out what the university is really like. If you look at the website, it's often a marketing exercise. And it's designed to recruit students. It doesn't say much about research or impact. It doesn't say much about the academics and what they do and the research culture, the teaching culture. It's very hard to find that information. Instead, you get world-class excellence, change maker, all that kind of stuff, which you can get from anywhere. It's management speak. It's kind of quite boring management speak. Visions, values, excellence. We don't need all that. We
Come and
want
be at
something
our
real.
university if you are curious, as if all students aren't going to be curious in some way, because that's
you get this. There's the sloganeering and the kind of the vision is of a business. The vision is of a corporation, which to my mind is a very, very dull and uninspiring vision for what the university should be. I think that's a real shame. And I think marketization has created these strange cultural dynamics that we should be resisting. And I think we are resisting.
Absolutely. So you had an example job advert that you sent through, which if you'll allow me, I'll just read it out for the benefits of people on the stream. So this is a real job advert, I understand, that Leo has found, and this is the kind of person that these corporatized sort of universities want to recruit and want to sort of put in front of students. This job advert is kind of bullet points, so just bear with me as I read it out. So it specifies that everything we do is underpinned by our core values and driven by a commitment to a change maker mindset. We look for this shared commitment across our staff and student community. Change makers see the bigger picture. Thinking beyond themselves and their environment, they're open to other viewpoints and consider the ripple effect of what they do on a personal, social, and commercial level. They're driven by having the biggest positive impact and a focus on the greater good. Change makers challenge the norm, challenging the status quo and not just accepting things at face value. That's when real impact and change can be delivered. And change makers have the drive as well as the vision. It's one thing having a vision, but having the drive and work ethic to realize that vision is another matter. Change makers relentlessly pursue every possible solution in order to achieve their goals. I mean, that sounds like an excellent description of my dog's enthusiasm when I take him on a walk. I mean, it doesn't say anything, does it?
It's very generic, very corporate, and there's a kind of an aggression behind that. I don't know what your dog is like. I'm sure he or she is a very nice, kind dog, right? But there's something behind that that sort of vision, and it speaks to that competition, right? Like only a change maker is able to be a winner, right, and a successful person. And it sounds like something out of Wall Street, the movie with the Gordon Gekko kind of character, greed is good.
Very individualized.
Very. And I worry that that's not really an adequate description of what a university is about. And I think this is one example of many where the kind of marketing and corporate level leadership I'm really not sure understands very well the student body or the academic body. And this is just one example of many, this sort of disconnect that this managerialism and marketization has created in British universities in recent years.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are sort of like engaged in this action from a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
It's very immediate, it's very pressing, looking at these kind of models of different potential cuts to our remuneration when we look at it long term. But it's really valuable to sort of think of where this fits in the bigger picture, because a lot of academic staff and professional services staff at universities and everybody who's like employed and participating in universities as organizations, in some way they would describe themselves as being committed,
Right.
as having sort of an association with the values of education, wanting to make a difference in the world. And all of this seems to be part of a movement that is challenging that and putting it under threat. So, students should be concerned about this as well, shouldn't they?
Well, I think they are concerned about it. And I think students and academics are on the same side here. The strike is regrettable. No one wants to strike. I love to teach. I enjoy my job. I'm committed to my job, as you are, as all of us are. We enjoy interacting with the students and being challenged by them and reading their work and discussing the readings with them, etc., and their experiences. It's why we came into this job. It's what we want to do, right? And we find ourselves unable to do that because we're continually having to fight this degradation of terms, conditions, pensions, etc. And it's very sad. And we are finding our own ways to respond and to fight back against that. And this strike is just one of those. The strike, I see it as part of a continuum of pushback against the marketized university. And another form of pushback is all the writing. There's something called critical university studies, which is a very rapidly growing area. And it might sound like navel gazing, and in some sense it is. It's academics writing about their own experiences. There's a whole book series on this. There's a whole series of journal articles, special issues around the university in crisis, or the university university in decline, or the dream of the university in tatters. There's a great book called The University in Ruins. And, this is sad, right? And this is a very important organization, the university, right? It's a key part of civil society. It's a place of ideas and development and culture. And it's struggling, right? And the marketization has not helped it realize its core mission. It's become distorted by the incentives of chasing the customer, chasing the cash, right? How we get out of that, I don't know. We're in a long battle. And it's not just in this country. We're seeing this all over the world. And I think it's up to us to, as educators, to educate the student body and beyond as to what's gone wrong here, and think about solutions, to step by step moving the university back in a direction that makes more sense for it and for the society that it tries to contribute to.
Thanks, Leo. That's really powerful, I think, probably to wind up at this point and sort of focus on that as being the core of not only what this particular industrial action is about, but about how we as a community, as members of just one university within the broader sector, can all be playing our part towards trying to make a difference in the societies that we're a part of. Because I think, I'm very passionate about this. Many of our colleagues are very passionate about this as well. This is part of a broader need within sort of our democratically organized societies for us to participate in bringing about things that are socially good. We want our societies to be better when we retire, when we move on, when we die. We want to leave a better world behind us through the work that we do. And through sort of simply going through the motions of these sort of marketized sector sort of push button style processes, we're not doing that, are we? So it's wonderful to have you on with us today. And along our local action, there have been rallies and pickets, and there will continue to be activities of that nature, I'm sure. So thanks again for coming along. I think we're going to wind up the Teach Out here. We have had a number of colleagues following along. And if you have questions or comments, anybody watching, please do feel free to add them to our YouTube channel. And we may well do something like this again if we end up in a protracted dispute. But we definitely hope that does not happen. So thank you again. And I look forward to seeing people in person and online to continue our political action and try and continue to make a difference. So thank you, Leo.
Thanks, Laura.
Just take you off the stream there. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. We will have a little discussion about people's feelings about this being on the wider internet, and possibly organize to see if we can edit this live stream down into some highlights so that there will be a record of today's session. Thank you again and have a great day.